Despite popular belief, there are actually a handful of characters that David and Dan managed to do justice in the later seasons, which is where I'm going to be focusing primarily because this list would be full of amazing characters who died in the earlier seasons like Tywin and Joffrey that David and Dan physically couldn't ruin. So the requirement is that they have to be alive in at least season 7 or 8. Also, I feel like it would kind of be cheating if I picked minor side characters like Pod the Rod, because they have very little screen time and development. Without further ado, number 10, Sansa Stark. Now, I know this may be initially controversial, but keep in mind, it's really hard to find 10 good characters that weren't ruined. So the first half of this list still has characters that are partially ruined. Sansa, out of all the main characters to me, has the best executed arc that doesn't have a bunch of major flaws. There are definitely aspects about it that are still flawed, like there not being a lot of defining moments in her arc that show her progress, and then multiple minor issues that start to add up. Examples of those include her general stupidity in certain areas like not telling Jon about the Veil, and overly trusting Littlefinger in season 7. Then the general contrivedness surrounding her character, like unjustifiably hating Daenerys so much. Also, it would definitely be nice if we saw more development of Sansa overcoming the conflicts of running a massive kingdom, and the North as a whole. There's easily a lot of conflict that you can brew up in this setting, especially given the circumstances of the story. Throughout the later seasons, we are essentially just told how great of a leader Sansa is, but David and Dan never really show us that. They focus a lot of the show's time in other areas and probably think the complexities of running a kingdom is boring when it isn't. Like, look at the earlier seasons of the show, or even House of the Dragon. Sansa essentially falls victim to the rushing of the story. However, from a story perspective, there's nothing that obliterates her character. It's all partially logical, she has a believable character arc, and she has arguably the best ending out of the main characters, on top of her consistently being relevant within the story, unlike some other characters. So overall, you kind of have to squint your eyes when viewing Sansa because her general form is intact, but the second you focus your eyes and look at the details, it mostly falls apart. Number 9, Samwell Tarly. Samwell as a character isn't entirely unscathed and still has some shaky aspects about himself. But in an overall sense, Samwell Tarly from a personality perspective is relatively fine and not overly destroyed. The couple bad aspects about him that I'm referring to is Samwell becoming Sam the Slayer, and him easily becoming the Grand Maester of King's Landing without proper training. The first one is obviously pretty rough. However, I'm willing to slightly look past this since everyone became immortal gods with plot armor during that episode. Then for the second one, him becoming Grand Maester is kind of a fan service ending that doesn't make sense due to his relative inexperience, but it at least is the correct direction for the character. Samwell also doesn't have a lot to do in the final season and basically is just there to tell Jon he's a Targaryen. But his season 6 and 7 goal was pretty important in that he learns about the deposit of Dragonglass and Dragonstone, along with him being a POV character. His relationship with Gilly and his son is largely overlooked, and Sam is essentially the middle road character where David and Dan didn't do anything great with him, nor did they decimate him like Tyrion. Number 8, Tormund. Now, Tormund in comparison to Samwell is kind of the opposite. I think his character in terms of how he's implemented into the story doesn't do anything overly stupid that does a disservice to him. However, I think David and Dan have severely dumbed down his character since the earlier seasons. He more or less has become just a comedic relief character when he used to also be a more intimidating, bold, and serious wildling who has sporadic bursts of comedy to release any built-up tension. It makes sense for his character to become more friendly over the seasons, but I think David and Dan do it so much to the point that he loses an integral aspect about himself. Like, the whole Brienne bait romance was funny at first, and it essentially becomes a weird fan service-esque meme that keeps returning that simultaneously robs the character of any seriousness, along with them doing overly silly things like the character chugging giant's milk for a century. He's still a very fun and enjoyable figure to watch, but he does lose that layer of depth from the earlier seasons that balanced him out. That's why I'm putting him at number 9, since he has this one negative aspect, but he's still largely intact to the point that he's not overly ruined. Number 7, Davos Seaworth. This is a character that I see a lot of love for, and to me, I never really loved him that much. In his earlier seasons, he's obviously great, like in his wonderful pairing with Shireen, and his morally complex pairing with Stannis Baratheon. However, after season 5, he spontaneously joins Jon's side and becomes his yes man. Like Tormund, I think he loses a lot of his complexity, and David and Dan don't do a lot with his character to make him overly interesting. He's my definition of the most neutral character in the later seasons. An example of an easy hanging fruit to develop Davos is the death of Mathos, and whether or not he's still mad at Tyrion for that. Instead, that goes unexplored, and you probably can't think of anything personal about the character that gets developed in the later seasons. He's kind of just along for the ride and fundamentally supports Jon. Like, that's fine, and on a technicality he isn't ruined, but he also isn't doing anything impressive within the story. Number 6. Grey Worm. Similar to Davos, Grey Worm is a very simple character that you really can't mess up that badly. Although, David and Dan still mess up one aspect about him towards the end, in which he flat out doesn't kill Jon, which essentially acts as a plot contrivance, but besides that, he has a good revenge arc. His romance with Missandei was really gratifying since it's two characters so entrenched in misery for their entire lives, and they finally find love that reinvigorates them. To then have that all ripped away by an evil queen makes Grey Worm's pure rage deeply connecting. Grey Worm, because of this, ironically has a better Mad Queen arc than Daenerys because it's much more justified and you understand his perspective more, albeit it's obviously more simple. I just wish they pushed that anger-fueled side of him more and had him show down against Jon at the end because that's really the more realistic path to take his character, given that he was executing prisoners for breathing, not him allowing these traitors to do whatever they want in the end and all of his anger evaporating. However, I think Grey Worm's ending of honoring Missandei is still pretty wholesome and works well too. Just don't tell him that there's apparently poisonous butterflies on Noth that will decimate them. Number 5. Olenna Tyrell. I would put Olenna a bit higher, but I feel like that would kind of be cheating since she really isn't in the later seasons all that much. David and Dan really nailed her 2 scenes within season 7 in which she gives some great advice to Dany and has one of the best death scenes in the show. Like, it's genuinely pretty jarring how good her overall death scene was in comparison to so many of the other mediocre to terrible scenes within the season. One aspect that really carries it is that it's a long-awaited payoff in that Olenna finally gets to tell Jaime that she killed Joffrey. It leads to the juiciest of reactions, and Diana Rigg absolutely nails the scene and utterly relishes in the pain and misery of Jaime Lannister. That smug little smile she gives Jaime is such an iconic moment that it easily cements itself as one of the best scenes in the later seasons. Then besides this, her talk with Daenerys feels the most genuine because she's actually giving her good advice, unlike Tyrion. Olenna encouraging Dany to become a Targaryen and not be afraid to show her true power was what should have happened all along, and it's too bad she didn't listen to her. Olenna may only have a couple of scenes within season 7, but they were impactful enough to land her onto my list because of how perfectly executed they were and how great of a character she was. Number 4. Theon Greyjoy. From an overall character arc perspective, Theon is pretty flawless. He has the most consistent and tangible arc in the show to the point that it would be almost impossible to mess up, and David and Dan don't. They still rough it up a bit towards the beginning of season 8, but it wasn't terrible. David and Dan have this grand setup for Theon's redemption and saving Yara by finally becoming a confident and fearless leader. He overcomes the nightmare of Reek and finally takes back his true identity of being a Greyjoy. However, it seems that David and Dan didn't really carry over this effort into season 8 because Theon simply waltzes into Euron's fleet at night, kills a couple of guards, and rescues Yara with almost no conflict. It's a little bit of a bummer that there wasn't a grand rescue kind of heist that has more impactful payoff or even overcoming Euron, someone that Theon previously ran away from. Honestly, thinking about it now, it would make much more sense for Theon to kill Euron than Jaime. Luckily though, this was the only misstep. His reunion with Sansa is really sweet and heartfelt, and the irony in that he dies protecting Bran, a character he was thought of for killing, is actually some brilliant writing. He may not have a lot of screen time and really dialogue scenes even, but these points in his character arc are pretty much perfect. Number 3. Jorah Mormont. Sir Jorah is just barely included enough in the story to not feel left out, and even though I'd like some more dialogue scenes for him, you could essentially say that for most of the side characters in the later seasons. The main reason why I'm putting him at number 3 is that his ending was by far the best thing to have happened during the Long Night. He may have kind of teleported outside of Winterfell to save Daenerys in that moment, but hey, I'll give it a pass since it makes sense from a character standpoint and not necessarily a contextual logistics standpoint. But at least in comparison to say Theon, Theon, there isn't a major aspect about his journey that was very underwhelming. His reunion scenes were charged with so much heart and emotion, his character pairings were all very intriguing, so much to the point that you just want more of them, and he was even regularly included in the action. Sir Jorah is essentially my go-to from one of the most consistently good side characters, aided with the fact that his overall story arc isn't that complex, so David and Dan couldn't ruin it that badly. Number 2. Brienne of Tarth. I think she's one of 2 characters that genuinely have some great character development in Season 8, because that's the main thing about Theon and Jorah, in that their character journeys essentially just come to an end without them changing a lot, which obviously isn't a bad thing. Meanwhile, Brienne goes through an entire end goal payoff for her character in which she finally becomes a knight, she finds love, and achieves an ultimate goal. On top of there still being some good build-up to Jaime and Brienne's romance, in which Jaime dismantles the mean figure she viewed him as. Just the knighting scene alone would easily put Brienne within my top 3, and is probably the best scene in Season 8. The genuine and serene happiness that gushes from both of these characters is massively cathartic, and it's one of those rare victories within Game of Thrones. It's also written really well, and having the scene slowly progress and build the excitement as the ceremony goes on, along with Ramin Djawadi elevating the wonderful emotions with his outstanding music. Then you can't help but feel so much joy for the character as she finally finds love in her life. That's something that she always struggled with and was emotionally beat down by, so having this love scene was great for the character. Even though Jaime leaves right away, the love doesn't disappear, and even she partially redeems Jaime's ending with yet another great scene in which she fills out the white book with all of Jaime's good deeds. Through and through a really well done job, and the main reason why she isn't in my number 1 spot is that she didn't have anything to do in Season 7. Number 1. Sandor Clegane. I feel like the primary reason why David and Dan were able to not ruin Sandor as a character is because he fundamentally plays into their writing strengths, and those strengths are generally more vulgar-based comedy, given that it seems David and Dan fall back on that kind of dialogue a lot in the later seasons. Although Sandor was really the only character that wasn't hurt by this. If anything, it even helped him since he had a lot of iconic funny moments. Sandor uses humor as both a way to destroy people and even as a defense mechanism. The only person that can get past this defense is Arya, given that she spent so much time with him. Like, seeing them together and witnessing a more mellowed out Hound was genuinely outstanding, and I'm really sad we didn't get more of that. Like, that was one of my favorite aspects from seasons 3 and 4. Their duo is infectious, and having his arc coincide with Arya's in that he shows her how revenge consumed himself and convinces her to escape was honestly pretty good. It's a perfect arc for the character and even pairs well with an additional main character. Then his ending was also great, and even though it was a bit fanservice-y, I can easily forgive it given that there were far greater issues about the episode. Having both the Hound and the Mountain die to fire was surprisingly poetic. Both from a character perspective and his relevance within the story, the Hound was consistently amazing and prevalent throughout. I know him coming back into the story in Season 6 is kind of a hot topic, but between all of the absurdly dumb things that happen later on, it's not a major deal. That and the direction it puts the character in was actually interesting. Thank God David and Dan did a great job with Sandor Clegane because he has always been one of my favorites, unlike what they did with Tyrion. Thank you for watching, and this video was a part of a double feature, so check out the top 10 characters ruined by David and Dan. Also, let me know in the comments what your ranking would be for this video.